Hello, and thank you for joining the Distributed Republic webcast. It's fantastic to have you here with us today. For those of you who haven't joined before, welcome. It's really great to be able to talk to you about some of the topics we're going to be talking about. This one particularly seems to have captured imaginations. I think we're up to about 780 registrations for today's workshop, so hopefully it's all of interest to you. So for those of you who haven't joined before, the Distributed Republic webcast explores the impact of decentralization, Web3, the Metaverse, and AI on our social, economic, and political systems. Our mission is to ensure that we can all benefit from the inception of new technologies and that we have access to the resources, education, and expertise to thrive in a digital world. Hence why I have Jonscott with me today, and he's going to be talking a little bit more about his skills within the area, knowledge of leadership and culture development in relation to AI. But our community is free to join. We have almost 500 members. So if you want to be able to join us, that would be fantastic. Our format for today's webcast is a discussion format. So me and Jonscott will be running through a few questions that we've already got prepared, looking at them in a bit more detail. We'll do our best to minimize jargon. And we're going to keep our answers as short and snappy as possible to make sure they're easy to follow. However, it's impossible to talk about these things without getting involved with some terminology. And our fantastic friends at Cybergear, particularly Sharad, has created this amazing AI terminology guide. So if you go to stan.store/Jamie Bykov-Brett and go to where it says AI terminology guide, anything that you hear that you go, you know what, I've not come across that word before, I'd like to know what it means or the context of it, then that's a great place to be able to start. And if you're looking for some useful resources, tools to be able to get started with AI and automation, I've collated a long list of all the different generators, large language models, all of this kind of stuff, which you can find on our community for free as well. And as always, please feel free to add your questions and comments. If we get time at the end, we will come back to them and bring them up. I can already see some of them coming through, which is fantastic. So without further ado, let's jump into today's workshop on leadership in the age of AI. And as I've said, I have the fantastic Jonscott with me today. Jonscott, would you like to give yourself the full justice of an introduction and what you do?
Sure. And again, to echo Jamie, I'll make this succinct. So my name is Jonscott Turco. My company, one of them is humanix.com, and I also have mixed.ai. I'm an organizational psychologist. I've been working around the world for more than 20 years, helping organizations create courageous cultures that drive innovation, engage and retain key talents, and grow bottom line results. This has led me, particularly in the drive innovation piece, to artificial intelligence, Web3, and all related technologies, because every leader I talk to and my clients around the world are curious how is this going to impact us, simply put. So I'll leave it there for now. My website is humanix.com, huminx.com, and mixd.ai. So I look forward to your questions. Please feel free to add them into the chat, and I'll let you keep an eye on the chat, Jamie.
Yeah, not a problem. I'll keep an eye on the chat and we'll go through the comments there. So let's jump into our first question, which is, how does AI impact transformative leadership and corporate culture? And what can leaders do to prepare for this shift?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've done a bit of research in addition to this, the normal experiences I bring to this. So I'll answer this kind of backwards, right? So what can leaders do to prepare for the shift? I think one is to be sure to embrace the fact, as I leaned into a client actually during the pandemic when they were wondering how changes are affecting them and they don't think it's going to be an issue. And I leaned in really closely and I said, it's happening. This is not no one's asking your permission for this. This is happening. So I think leaders need to understand that the way artificial intelligence, Web3 is a macro of artificial intelligence for the purposes of our talk today. It's going to transform every aspect of how the organization functions, how people interact with one another, and how your bottom line is driven. Your customer interactions. I mean, every facet of business is going to be interacted with and impacted. So leaders need to be prepared for this by staying on top of current AI trends, by embracing the fact that I saw a wonderful artist, her name's escaping me right now, here in Dubai last week, and she talks about how we need to stop thinking in the binary. It's either AI or it's people. You know, it's a mix. hate to sound like, self-serving with the name of the company, but it's a mixed reality. So how organizations and leaders are going to stay on top of this and embrace this is by taking action to understand what this means for them, some examples of how it can impact them, seeking the advice of people who are familiar with it, and understanding that you can't know what you don't know, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
So being open and curious. Hate to sound like those of you who are familiar with Ted Lasso, but stay curious, because I think that's what drives my knowledge and the growth of my companies. And our friendship, frankly, in so many ways, Jamie, is impacted by the fact that we're both so curious, as is Sharad Argawal and the whole team, whole Metashapers group, who we were just on a call earlier. So I think that's an important piece, making sure that they look at data-driven decision-making as a partner in their human decision-making, helping it as a tool, not seeing it as a replacement. And the reality is very simple. And I want to kind of address the elephant in the room with this. Will certain jobs be displaced by this? Yes. Is that part of the normal evolution as we enter the fourth industrial revolution, or whatever you want to call it? Absolutely. So whenever people say, people are going to lose their jobs, and I said, oh my God, I'm really concerned about all the blacksmiths, all the horseshoes that haven't been made since the car was invented. We should just really scrap automobiles. So, I tend to have like that kind of a way of approaching it. I think also looking at fostering that innovation internally, not just relying on, what you can grab from the marketplace, but, dedicating resources. And we see this with the larger places like Meta and other companies that are saying they have a whole enormous resources dedicated to this. But for your organization, no matter what the size is, put some people involved. People are curious, no matter what the verticals I work across: banking, commerce, manufacturing, fashion, anything pharmaceuticals. There's a group of people, a subgroup, that are really fascinated about how this is going to drive this. So engage those people. It helps. It's a win-win for everybody. It helps your company. It helps the people. And as a leader looking to grow your organization through these interesting and unpredictable times, this is going to drive an innovative corporate culture and a culture of curiosity and of courage, which is going to then lead to action and results going forward.
Amazing answer. There's so many little bits that I want to pick out on, but I know we'll touch on some of those later on. But one bit for me, I think, that really resonated is that psychological process of change and transition. I think that one of the challenges we have when we're always looking at technological infrastructure change and digital innovation in our organization is we look at the technology, we look at our organization, but we often don't think about how do we lead people on that journey of change. And a lot of the points I think that you pick out on the work that you do as well is realizing that there is a huge psychological process. You can't have an industrial mindset and participate in a digital workforce.
That's great.
You can't. Yeah, they're not compatible. They take a very different way of being able to operate. And a lot of us have been educated with that industrial mindset for a digital workforce. And that's not going to work. That's not going to serve us. So how can we help support people on that journey to be able to understand the change curve that they need to be able to lead on, to be able to adopt this new technology, not just try and fling the technology at the walls and see what sticks. But I know we've got some around kind of addressing anxieties around employment. So I'm going to move on to that bit. But sure. I think there's a few points that I think is really worth touching on that we'll probably cover a bit more as we go through.
Yep. Great.
So how can leaders use AI to address job insecurities and anxieties among employees due to potential automation?
So this is a tough one, right? And I see some of the comments, new opportunities, Matthew said, being hopefully creating jobs that are lost, of course. So I think that first and foremost, for leaders in general, and for all of us, frankly, transparency and communicating. People often ask me, because I've been doing this quite a long time, what's the most important leadership tip, tool, strategy? And I said, leaders who impress me at this point are leaders that feel very comfortable saying, I don't know. I don't know. Let's find the solution. Let's engage teams. Let's have training and information gathering and conversation to help drive this. And if people, I've had some leaders push back and say, we don't have the time to do that. I said, well, you're going to need to make the time now or when you fall behind all your competitors. So your choice. I think having transparent communications, as I said, embracing I don't know. We are moving so fast. I mean, when you and I first started addressing some of these things over almost 2 years ago at this point, we couldn't imagine how things have evolved. And frankly, going forward, we can control the narrative to a degree if we are the innovators. And if we're just spectating and consuming this information, then we'll be far behind. So I encourage leaders and everyone to get involved, learn learn about what's happening, stay on top of the trends. There's tons of information coming on a regular basis. And also, looking at the combination, it's not a binary decision. You're not going to flip a switch and say, Jamie's gone, he's replaced by AI. These are going to be hybrids. We talk about prompt engineering with ChatGPT and others, how you ask AI for things. And this will be one of the jargons I hope you can find on Metashaper's definitions. But we talk about prompts, how you asking, what you're asking, how it comes out is going to be important. And also creating a supportive environment, having a risk appetite. It's one of the it's a hallmark of dynamic, agile, and innovative organizations. Having a risk appetite based on a collective intelligence and a pursuit of knowledge, so that people say, you know what, I'm going to try to find the answer. These are the options I saw. Let's go with it and test it and see what happens. I think that's really, really critical. So people are going to be partnering with AI. It's going to be a integrated process of decision making for leaders. And I think it has a huge and vast opportunity to change how we work, how we live, and consequently how businesses drive the future of their business and our world in general.
Amazing. Some really lovely points in there. And I think for me, it relates to the last one that you said as well, which is, how is AI going to disrupt the job market? And if you look at Goldman Sachs report, that 300 million jobs are likely to be displaced by AI by 2030. That's 25% of the global workforce working within a digital space is going to be displaced by 2030, and that means a lot of change, a lot of disruption. But there is a running joke in the communities that we're a part of, which is your job won't be taken by AI, but it might be taken by somebody who knows AI. And what can we do to skill the workforce to be able to make sure that people are aware of these new digital tools? Because as soon as every time the power of the internet increases and we're able to do more things digitally, the gap widens between those who are capable of using it and those who can't. And I think AI is really kind of the technological advent of wielding fire. If as soon as humankind was able to wield fire, we were able to take giant steps within that space. And from a digital perspective, I think AI very much falls within that space. So what can organizations need to really think about how they can support their employees to understand how to leverage these tools, and also to think about some of the economic models as well. We put a lot of emphasis on organizations here, but our political institutions, our economic models were not designed for this industrial workforce. We need to invest in things like understanding how universal basic income or universal basic services could help provide, because you won't need as much labor within the workforce as we have done previously.
Sure.
So I think for me, those are some big things that we can help address the anxieties that people see when it comes to some automation as well.
Absolutely. It's funny, Jamie, you just reminded me of something. So I've been an adjunct professor for 27 years, and watching how the evolution of education is going, we had a conversation not too long ago with some colleagues, and the person who was having ringing the bell that we should they should ban AI on campus and just things that were ludicrous. I know some of these folks a very long time, very long time. And I said to the person I was speaking to, I said, you said the same exact stuff when the internet came out. I said, so 30 years ago, so stop. So I think it does take a different mindset and to try to stretch a bit.
Amazing. Let's go on to our next question, which is, what strategies can organizations implement to educate their workforce about the benefits of AI?
It's interesting. First, again, to keep on top of the information, to make sure that they're current, because there's one thing I always find interesting, and I said this to you in a few other conferences I've spoken at. Experts in this field are interesting. The terminology is interesting because it's changing so fast. You could be an expert today, and if you just sleep on it for a week, you're already gone. You're gone. So I think looking at the opportunities for collaboration between human employees and technology, I'll say as a sweeping piece. Obviously, AI is one of them. And it happens a lot more than we may realize already. I think this is part of the key, right? I think as I sit here and I work and I ask, Alexa or Siri, what's next on the calendar, or whatever it is, like we're interacting with things much more regularly. I think transparency is a key. And I saw in the comments, I think the I don't know is a really great indicator of vulnerability.
Mhm.
I think for those of you that are curious, and unsurprisingly, her comment above, Lorraine Margarita has a great book out now called Shared Decision Making in the Corporate Arena. And I encourage you to look it up because it addresses a lot of these mindsets and also practical solutions. And I think that's what we're all trying to find, right? We're educating the workforce on the benefits of AI. So it's going to require organizations and leaders to give people the opportunity to research things to see how it's going to impact their area. One of my clients is actually having their groups. So the finance group, the marketing group, they're coming up, they're each creating a presentation on what the likely impact of AI is on their specific arenas. And then once they have those conversations, they'll have a larger macro conversation. So I think transparency, I think continuous monitoring of AI advancements, so making sure that you kind of stay on top of things is important. I think continuously investing in agile business models. There's no greater, what is it, Jack Welch? Like when the pace of change outside is greater than the pace of change inside, the end is near. If you stop being aware, being curious, staying on top of things, then clearly your business is going to suffer. Your people are going to leave for organizations that are more dynamic, that are more innovative, and that give them more autonomy to learn and grow. And cultivating a culture of experimentation and learning from failures. I mean, I'm a huge proponent in this. I think we have a fear of failure that is paralyzing not just business, but to speak in a macro sense, it's paralyzing society and the world. Like, this is what I know. I'm going to do this. I'm going to stay hyper conservative. And, the joke recently was, when someone said, I'm a conservative when it comes to my thought process on things, and said, well, yeah, it's like saying, you know what, I want the cancer treatment from the 40s. I don't want the new cancer treatments. So, so it's ludicrous when you think about that from a business operations and management and leadership perspective, because we have to stay on top of things. We have to stay agile. If you get lazy, it's over fast, because the pace of change is insane and it's accelerating, frankly. I mean, even conversations you and I had a year ago are so far in the rear view right now. So if you lose track of it, if you let it go and you just said, it's not going to impact us, we're really solid here, I think you're in for a rude awakening. So I think, transparency, encouraging risk, having a risk appetite, encouraging innovation, which again encourages risk, I think it's really critical.
And I think that what you're saying there ties in a lot to the psychological safety of being able to experiment with these things, understanding that mistakes will happen along the way. A lot of people are realizing this when it comes to things like the use of ChatGPT. They're like, should we really have been sharing that data? Is that something that we intended to do? Did we want to train this language model with our company information? And organizations have started to develop these policies in place to kind of mitigate against some of that. But at the same time, if you don't stay ahead of the curve, you don't start to learn how these things work. There's no more dangerous words in the English language than this is the way we've always done it. And particularly in the digital world, when things are moving, remember, the catchphrase probably about 15, 20 years ago was every business has to be a digital business and every business has to be an online business. Every business nowadays has to be able to take on board these elements of AI and automation. And sometimes I feel that we use them interchangeably, but there's some aspects there where we're talking about how can we cut down the time that people are spending doing tasks that have very little meaning to that person, and so they can do more of the things that we find meaningful within our organization, more of the things that are, I always talk to people about the strategy. There's 3 questions that I would always ask someone who's looking at automation. The first one is, do you think an intern could do it? In which case you could probably have an AI or automate it. Is the task repetitive? In which case you could probably look at automation to be able to do it. And does the task involve a lot of text? And if it does, it's likely that it could be handled by a large language model. And if anyone's looking in their organization of going, right, I want to be able to implement some of these things, those are the 3 questions that you have to start with to say, where can I get involved with being able to implement these things within our workforce?
Yeah, I think it's great. There's great comments coming through. I'm gonna comment really quickly on Sharif Powell's comment. How can companies go from researching impact to implementing without disruption? You can't. It's like saying, how can you change your clothes without being naked? You have to. There's going to be an inevitable piece of time that you're kind of in between. So you're not quite researching. You're kind of testing. You're modeling. You're testing. So there's ways to keep the background going so that you're not just halting all business. And at the same time, you're going to have to take leaps into things. And I think your customers and potential customers and clients will understand, because you're innovating to innovate their success as well. You're not just doing this to help your company, you're serving your constituents, your clients, your customers. So this is only going to be helpful. If it doesn't meet that simple requirement, that's a separate conversation.
Mm-hmm. If there's always that kind of anecdote of, change, disruption isn't the goal, change is the goal, disruption is just the byproduct of change. And when I hear people talk about being a disruptor, I'm like, okay, I get where you're going at, but the actual aim here isn't necessarily to disrupt, it is to create that change. And you can't have one without the other. It's the input and the output that we have. So let's jump on to our next question. We're going to get through as many as we can. And also loving the questions and comments coming through in the chat. Do feel free to keep posting those there. So how do you see the influence of AI on our behavioral dynamics within a team or an organization?
Yeah, this is what I was looking very forward to. I think the influence of AI on behavioral dynamics within a team is largely dependent on the leaders running that organization and team, and the team members and how they choose to embrace artificial intelligence or other technologies that are going to disrupt the way things used to be done. Mm-hmm. So I think that there has to be, again, a mindset of curiosity, also looking at how things are going to play out. And if we can game it, I know I tend to do this and see, there's 3 or 4 different options to way innovation and change is going to happen. These are the ways it can happen. This is the way it's going to impact. I think if leaders and organizations are transparent, if they embrace the I don't know, if they're clear and have an open communication with their teams, if they provide, as you said, the psychological safety, it's really critical. I think this is going to be the differentiator. How leaders posture, if they are real and transparent and say, I don't know. This is the great equivalence, right? No one knows how this is going to play out specifically for their organization or in general. So I think it's really critical when people say, how this is going to impact us? Well, we really don't know. Let's see different ways it may impact us. Let's learn ways to do this. And let's ideate with this. I mean, and frankly, I know some of the simple ways you mentioned about automation and AI, I've used them in the recent past as well, because it just helps me with mundane things that I would wind up just sitting there, not using a tremendous breadth of brain power, a lot of it concentrated on something relatively menial. So I think, if we can look at the behavioral aspects of things, I have a client who's looking at, no AI mornings and AI hours to see how it can innovate what they're working on. So there's got to be, curiosity and innovation built in and baked in, because then it's going to promote innovation from your leaders, from your key employees, from employees that are always going to be curious about what's happening elsewhere, and if they're going to be committed to you and your organization. If you provide the safety and provide the opportunity to innovate, I think it's going to go a long way in enhancing the behavioral dynamics and the courage your organization has in building its future.
Love it. There's so much there around the fact that we don't know what these roles are going to look like. It's very hard to educate and train and look at the behavioral dynamics of your workforce when you're not really sure what you're shaping people to. But then at the same time, I feel that is a dynamic in itself, where you have to be able to go, how can we support people to manage uncertainty? How can we support people to be able to be innovative and to look outside of the box and to try new things? Because they're behaviors that potentially, if we were looking at the workforce 10, 15 years ago, that might have been squashed a little bit. You go, you know what, you go in, you do your job, it's this thing, you know exactly what it is. And that's why we've got a job description, because our job description says that you should be doing this, 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 and this. And actually, when you're trying to prepare people for new innovative jobs that we're not really sure or not clear on what those are going to look like, it takes a shift in being able to support people's mindset, that building that safety, and being an organization that really shows that in its values as well. It can't just be about the technological infrastructure, but how can you prepare your workforce to take those roles?
Yeah, think about something really elemental, which is if you as a leader don't help your teams learn and implement these things and have an open conversation that's transparent as well, I think it's a very simple reality to say that most of your people and the way this is going to play out is not going to be the most optimal way. For example, if you as a leader in an organization just have a trouble communicating with your people and aren't, they're not going to create the best case scenarios in their brain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Typically, they will worry and fret about what's the worst possible way it can happen, and that will spiral within organizations. I've seen it dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I'm sure we all have. So be transparent, own the things you know and don't know, and then help drive the future with your team engaged.
Amazing. So let's jump on to our next question, which is, what are the key strategies that leaders should implement to anticipate and adapt to marketplace opportunities and disruption caused by AI?
I think, again, creating internal teams that are going to be addressing this goes a long way. I have a few clients who are working on this, and it's a cross-functional group. I think making sure that they have a team or that they are themselves dedicated to staying on top of current trends and experimenting with them, I think is really important, because anticipating and adapting to opportunities and disruptions is a hallmark of so many different aspects of leadership. So we're providing now, with all the resources we have, great opportunity for leaders and teams to stay on top of the trends that are happening. Every organization is going to be disrupted by technologies we're talking about, bar none. I've seen people asking in the chat about healthcare, about all different aspects of work. I mean, I have a few clients in the pharmaceutical and vaccine areas, and AI is modeling new vaccines. We're talking about all different possible innovations. And I think that we have to also recognize how far along this path we already are. So I think, we're not starting from zero right now. This is a moving target. Many years ago, with a client that builds airplanes, there's a video we showed about, they built an airplane in the sky, and it's a great analogy for what's happening. They're building an airplane as it's flying. They're still completing it. And I think that's largely a nice metaphor for what we're talking about right now. I think the short-term piece is going to be how we're driving this change and promoting innovation and empowering our teams. And we're going to reveal opportunities, and we're going to create disruptions as opposed to having to react to them. So the more active and involved leaders and organizations are, the less reactive they're going to have to be. And that's always going to be a favorable position to be in. I'd rather my clients and myself and my organizations and people I care about take chances and learn and grow and risk and model and see how things go, versus sitting still, hoping it passes them by, and then all of a sudden have to be driven into a panic and listen to an expert who 6 months ago or a year ago was doing something completely different and random. So I think it's, like everything else, it's staying active and present. And I talked about two things all the time with my clients. It's about courage and action. So have the curiosity to research things, have the courage to try them, and disrupt yourself, because disrupting yourself is something you can control a bit more than just waiting for outside external forces to disrupt you. So I think it's really, really critical that they look at going forward.
I know we had a couple more questions, Pam, but we've got so many comments and questions. I think it's more relevant to be able to go and answer what people are asking. So sure. I'm going to bring up a few. So let's start with Agnes' one here. Based on how people are embracing AI and using it in their day-to-day activities, do you think AI is going to encourage innovations and creativity in various industries?
So Agnes, great question. I think that it's an absolute yes and an absolute no, right? So I think it depends on the industry and the people driving those. I think you can see it now with ChatGPT. I have a lot of lazy ChatGPT people who are like, just ask it simple questions, aren't really concerned about prompts. They just want it to summarize things or give them, I don't know, whatever it is. You have people who are like building it in, like Jamie has a great AI assistant and a number of different processes automated, and they're digging into what are different ways this can impact and help us. And to, again, think about this in a non-binary way. It's not human or AI. The artist said she has a non-human collaboration. If we look at it this way, look at artificial intelligence as non-human collaborators. And again, I'm giving you one example, but looking at it that way, I think, is a really important way to look at it. I think creativity is also about psychological safety and saying, this may work, this could be innovative, let's try this. I think being a leader that encourages that are really critical.
I'm going to go into the next one, and mainly because I really want to answer it. And apologies if I get your name wrong. Amandine? mainly because I'm an ex-youth worker. So, many years ago, I was started off in youth work. So hello from France. I'm 19 years old, fully aware and interested in the AI revolution, specifically in marketing. In which direction can I go to learn more about it and make it my job, since a lot of people still don't believe in it? Now, first of all, I'm obviously going to advocate for my community, Distributed Republic. We've got loads of resources there, loads of different tools. If you want to be able, resource guides, how-to guides to be able to get started. But I think the first thing that you can do at this point in time is to show people what it can do, because the biggest challenge that we have, and where I tend to find that there's a lot of money to be made from a personal perspective, is showing people the art of the possible. At the moment, there's a great quote by Steve Jobs, which is that if you put everyone in a room to try and make the iPhone before the iPhone had come out, they would have never created the iPhone, because they didn't know the technology, they didn't know the capability. It needed to be shown to someone first before they're like, you know what, that actually works really well. So my thing is, if you're young, you're getting started in AI, particularly if you're looking at it from a marketing point of view, show people, develop those case studies, give people the demonstrations of what it is, because it's going to give you a lot more credibility. It's also one of the most employable skills of 2023. If we look at the beginning of the year, the most hired skill that people were putting on applications was capability to use ChatGPT. And I think that goes to show a seismic shift in the workforce to go, if you want to be able to have new skills that are employable, that people are going to want to be able to leverage, that's a great place to be able to start. Jonscott, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think that it reminds me of some of the, I guess, say, predictions that we made with clients, 7 or 8 years ago. And one of them was relating to Apple. And it said, the top selling Apple products in 2025 haven't even been conceived yet. None of them are what it is now. So, if I told you 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, about artificial intelligence, it would be hard for us to grasp it. And again, I hate to go back this far, but I remember being at my first job after graduate school when we had a meeting and the conversation was if we're going to try this internet thing,
Mm-hmm.
So my office was chosen. They put another phone line in. My boss and I log on, and it was old school for those of you that are around then. It was like, the log in, and then it was AOL. And then we looked at each other and we said, what do we do now? We had no idea. So I think we're at a similar juncture now, the majority of people in the world, to not understand what it can be, what it can mean to us, and what it can impact in terms of how we relate to one another business-wise. So I'm looking at this, right? How do we think we can help educators to understand how AI can be seen as an additional tool to help improve education and not a burden? I think that's a great question from LinkedIn user. I think, we can understand that the opportunity is going to be there for people to take advantage and to, there's always going to be bad actors, people who are looking at it for just strictly a personal benefit and not looking at the greater benefit of it overall. I think from an education perspective, it reminds me of, we weren't allowed to have calculators in class because the conversation was that you're never going to carry a calculator around with you all day long, every day. I think that education, it goes to what you said earlier, Dave, we still have an industrial educational for a digital workforce. So education is going to need to change dramatically to meet the future needs of business, and that relates to artificial intelligence, the metaverse, all different ways that Web3 and future innovations are coming fast. Because these changes now that we're embracing and that we're seeing and that we're harnessing for the future are being driven exponentially faster by the technologies that came before them. When we first, ventured into the wilderness of the internet, it was just green field. There was just nothing there because nothing was created. Now we are doing these things at such a rapid pace. It's really, really dynamic and interesting.
Amazing. I'm going to end our webcast here. So, Jonscott, thank you so much. Any final comment that you want to wrap up with, and then we'll.
I want to acknowledge all the comments, because there's great comments, and there's no simple, succinct, right answer to any of these questions. So I encourage the discourse. I encourage everyone to chat to Distributed Republic, and join the community. It's a very innovative and dynamic thought process that's encouraged and anticipated. I think you'll see this grow very much going forward, and just stay curious. Honestly, just keep looking at ways this can be impactful, ways you can drive the change. That's my final word, right?
Cool.
Drive the change. Don't wait around for the change.
I want you to say one more thing, which is how can people get in contact with you for your services?
So my website is Humanix, probably the most simple way, HUMINX.com. My email is below there. It's jonscott@humanix.com. Best way probably is on LinkedIn, because I spend most of my professional networking there. I encourage you to ask any questions, and look forward to following up with you all. Take care.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I just want to add on as well, if you're looking to learn more about these topics, obviously this is the Distributed Republic community, but also I work as a digital identity and AI thematic lead at MetaCampus. Fantastic stuff if you're looking to develop your education in this subject. We've got lots of different presenters, lots of different workshops and sessions. So if that's something that you're interested in for your organization or as an individual, check out metacampus.com. Metacampus.ai. And if your organization is interested about how to implement these, not just from technological aspects, but from that human psychological aspect as well, marrying up that technological capability with the human-centric approach as well, then do get in contact with me. We'd love to be able to work with your organization to develop workshops and help you with finding the right providers and getting everything in place for you to take on board this digital revolution. We've run a little bit over, but I want to say thank you so much for the comments. Even from the moment that we've just done with them, we've got 18 extra ones there. So thank you so much for joining it, and we look forward to catching you at the next workshop or webcast very, very soon. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everybody. Take care.